Hello, everybody. Welcome to ReGen Ag Chat number 28. This is Dung beetles will be at carbon calling. So we're joined by Bruce Thompson, who is an Irish dairy farmer. So we'll come to him in a second. My name's Liz Jennifer. We've also got Nick Drenison. What have you been up to recently, Nick?
Apart from sweating profusely for the last 5 minutes, I have been, we've been on holiday to Scotland. I messaged Bruce while we were there. I was in a wet, windy, cold caravan, feeling quite sorry for myself. And next year, I think we're going to go somewhere hot. And while we were there, typically, last year when we were on holiday, the bull broke his willy. This year, we had a heifer bulling and her leg, she must have got bashed and broke her leg. So it wasn't hugely relaxing, but it was a break. But what I wanted to say in my little update is we've, the Woodland Trust paid for us to have a bird survey. And I don't know how much it costs to have a bird survey, but it was like, it took him 4 days. And he's, we're going to get the report back in the winter when the ecologists just sit in a dark hole, I think, and write reports. But he has told me that we've got all 5 owls. And I didn't know there was only 5 owls in the country. But we've got all 5 and at least 4 are breeding. Hopefully the 5th one will be. But I just keep seeing owls now everywhere. And I think because we've got taller covers, there's lots of food. And I don't really get overly excited about birds, but I think I can get quite excited about owls. Watching them hunt is just amazing.
To clarify, that is the barn owl, the tawny owl, the little owl, the short-eared owl, and the long-eared owl.
Mm. So what is interesting is these. I know you always bang on about we need data, and I always think data is quite dull. But actually, so randomly, BBC phoned up today they wanted to come and do something around birds. And when you say that stat and you've got it written down and it's proper, they just take notice of it. So it's all right to say, oh, we've got lots of owls, but now we've got it. So farmers on the call, I would urge you to get data, but I don't know how much it costs, but it's not cheap. We've just had a bat survey done, which we had to pay for, which was a fortune. We've got lots of bats too, but I'm not so excited about bats.
But some of it is that working with local wildlife trusts is a way of doing it, and most villages or towns have a slightly enthusiastic person about birds. So it doesn't. So yeah, it's nice to have it as a documented and repeatable and all of that. But sometimes you can get some observational information from volunteers that are around you or want to.
Universities. We have a university working over here at the moment, gathering data on and IDing insects, dung beetles, of course. Because that works out of a quarter of the price when you can employ someone that's trying to do a PhD. They're quite cheap. That's another option.
And my obsession with data is because I am a scientist by background, but also generally the feedback is what would I have done differently if I had my time again, and everybody says I should have got some more baselines at the beginning. So it's also trying to preempt that, isn't it, in terms of but also if you haven't got baselines, it doesn't mean thou shall never do anything. It's just this is your new baseline, and there'll still be improvements.
But I think that they're so cool. Owls are so cool. I saw one last night and I heard it. It was like hovering around this like long covered field we got, and then it looked around and then it just pounced down. There was a bit of squealing, and then it just stayed there and ate it. And it was
going to be awkward if they eat dung beetles. Just saying.
Wow. Well, we won't talk.
Well, they do. Yeah. Actually,
Do they?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's why we've got so many. It's like a circle of life. But so, Liz, what about you?
I've also been on holiday. I've been to Norfolk for 3 days. The flatlands. So no, it was nice. It was very hot. You can detect I'm even redder than normal, but yeah, it was good. Fish and chips, ice cream, standard. Crabbing.
I saw your picture. I know exactly where you were. But and the other thing that we've both been charging around doing is carbon calling stuff.
Yes.
picking up pace.
What is it, 3 weeks away?
Yeah. Hence Bruce's being here. I've got a couple of days of hardcore pressure washing. Tim, who's on the call, is away, and I'm going to be pressure washing with his chat mic a lot. So yeah, no, it's all coming together. And we're going to get Bruce over here. Jamie will be arriving, and then we need to talk about the workshops, Liz.
Yeah, so we've got as announced on the last call, I think Jim or Jaime Elizondo, I'm practicing, is over for a few days. We were going to do a second conference at Farm Ed, but that they didn't want to do that. So we're doing 2 technical workshops with him, one in Ashbourne in Derbyshire with a guy called Nick Adams, who volunteered after the last call when we were talking to Jim, and second one with Sarah Hammond, who's on the call tonight over in Denbighshire. So if you go to carboncalling.farm, there the booking details are on that. So they're slightly further south than the Cumbria one. So if people want to go and see Jaime, they can. They have that opportunity on the 6th and 7th of September. So the 6th is in Derbyshire, the 7th is in Denbighshire. And then on the Sunday, the 10th, we've also got Jaime doing a workshop up in Cumbria in the morning. We've also got Ian Bell doing one on soil biology and compost. And we've also got Anna de la Vega doing one on vermicomposting on the Sunday. So all 3 of them we've had chats with in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all coming together.
Yeah, and then my added element of stress is I did get onto the Create course that I think I was talking about last time, and that is the week before. So that just adds an extra level of drama to my life, but there we go. It's all good.
But that'll be amazing, Liz.
Yeah.
And all the other people on the course will also be amazing.
There's 20 of us. So, and from a real mixture of people. Some people I know from the UK, some people I don't, and then also some people from Portugal, Estonia, France, I think, as well. So
just to warn everyone that's at Carbon Calling, Liz at Carbon Calling Cumbria may be quite tired. So
yeah,
just be aware, everyone.
It'll be fine. It'll
be quite snappy, possibly.
I'll just need to eat. It'll be fine. I keep saying that like it's like an anxiety thing. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Right.
So
shall we begin?
Bruce, yeah. I don't know how we first found you, Bruce. Was it through some AHDB stuff? I can't remember.
I honestly can't remember either, but I remember absolutely breaking it coming on the first webinar, because it was one of the first ones I did.
And it wasn't through there was also a couple, wasn't there, from Oxford way?
Oh yeah, Darren and Kerry Mann. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it might have been through them.
I'm not sure. I don't know, but it was 20. I don't know. It was must have been very early days in lockdown.
Yeah, it was back in the days when we were disinfecting our shopping and doing all that sort of crazy stuff. Yeah.
But since then you've done your Nuffield.
Done my Nuffield, yeah. It was done in reverse, of course. So yeah, I got to do my traveling at the end, the global focus end of it, after I had finished and handed in my my report. So it was kind of done backwards. So yeah, I got eventually to travel last year. So it was cool.
Can you just tell people a bit about you? And
okay. Yeah. Right, you're really stuck for content. So
if you can cry or talk about some family trauma, that's when she likes that.
Yeah, okay.
Love that. But no, a bit about.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah,
not anything about dung beetles yet. Just about you and your farm.
Yeah, well, look, I suppose I finished secondary school, went on to study automobile engineering, and came from a family farm background, 54 cows, and didn't want nothing to do with farming at the time. It was, well, to be honest, I did have a bit of an interest in it, but at the time you were looking at the Celtic tiger over here. You heard of that, I presume. we're kind of world renowned for our economic growth, and yeah, at the time there was a lot of multinational, particularly American companies, were coming to Ireland to like Google and Outlook and all those companies were setting up in Ireland, eBay, and building was booming in the country. Farming was restricted by milk quotas, and yeah, there wasn't any great outlook in farming at all. So we were all off doing engineering and computer programming and building houses for people to come into the country to do all that work. So the advice in secondary school was to stay well away from farming. It was a dead end industry. And then, of course, we had the economic crash where basically there was people just walked out of houses in the country. And yeah, I suppose that kind of shifted the focus in Ireland back to agriculture again and primary industry. At the same time, well, before that happened, I guess, there was a tuberculosis outbreak on my farm here with my dad, and he lost 48 of his 54 dairy cows, and he was giving up. And I said, look, I'll come home for a year, get it straightened out. And 23 years later, here I am. Yeah, so yeah, never left it. So I suppose, look, I kind of regret now not pursuing a formal education in agriculture. I got the I suppose the Costco version of the green cert, which is the cheap and cheerful one where you got at the time got away with murder, just got away with getting the bare stamp to say that I was a trained farmer. So I wasn't really a trained farmer, but my dad will tell you different. Yeah, so I came home and milk quotas ended in 2015, and we pushed on from there. Yeah, married my childhood sweetheart, and Laura. She's with me about 24 years now, and married her a few years ago. No, I won't get into that, the finer details, because I'm going to hang myself here. So back before the kids were born, anyway. Yeah, so that's basically what got me to here. We moved onto the home farm and set up shop here, and was doing a bit of agricultural contracting with machinery, and saw then that the potential was there in the dairy industry, and pushed on them with the dairy farm by purchasing land, leasing land, and renting land, and increasing stocking rates. And when I came home, at first there was sheep on the farm, and I told my dad it's either me or them. So I said goodbye to the sheep, and yeah, just increase the stocking rates with the dairy cows. So that's got us to where we are today. I guess that's Bruce's story. Yeah.
So how many are you milking now?
About 300.
That's quite a lot, isn't it, in Ireland?
Yeah, I think it would be. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what the national average is now, but it's 100 or less maybe. I think it has changed quite dramatically since 2015 nationally. So yeah, it would be quite on the larger side. Yeah, and sure, look, I suppose since 2020, I was talking to you last week, we took on a lease on my neighbour's farm across the road. So that gave us room for another 80 cows. Yeah, so that's where we're at. And we're kind of, I think we're kind of stocked to the point that we can't really stock anymore. So we're just refining the operation now, I suppose. Trying to increase our kilograms of milk solids out of cows, without increasing the inputs, which is tricky. So it is.
And that is, are you rearing your own heifers, or are they being reared elsewhere? Is that
no? They've been reared here, which is, look, I think is very important for what we're trying to achieve on our farm. And unfortunately, we got caught with tuberculosis there last autumn, so we've had to keep a lot of young stock on the farm that we didn't really need to keep. So there's a lot of we've I think 490 animals or something on the farm at the minute, including my dad, and so, yeah, so yeah, we keep the young stock, and we're kind of look, we're genomically testing them and picking the best ones out of it. You're aware of genomic testing? Is that something you're doing? Yeah. And we're grazing them then in a manner that they're building up resilience to parasites, which is one of the things I was looking at with my Nuffield. So that when they come into the milking herd, that they have good resilience to being exposed to parasites. And yeah, look, I suppose, look, in Ireland here, the industry is a little bit, it's slightly different than what you're doing over there. 90% of the milk in Ireland is exported, over 90%, I think it's 91%. So we are, unfortunately, I hate using the word, but we're selling a commodity, really. So what we're selling is produced, basically it's a dried product mainly, or a long store product, so like your cheese or infant formula. Interesting fact is that Ireland produces 11% of the world's infant formula. But
so don't the Irish eat many cornflakes? If you're only 9% of the milk is being consumed.
Yeah.
Do you just not drink much milk?
Well, we do drink the same amount of milk, but the population in comparison to the population of cows is out of kilter in comparison to you guys. So
well, have you got loads? Is there loads of cows?
There's a lot of cows, yeah.
Is it?
And 1/3 of them, I think, is 1/3 of them, I think, is down in Cork, County Cork, is something serious like that. But yeah, we've 1.5 million, 1.6 million, I think, dairy cows. And
there's 5 million Irish. The population of Ireland is just over 5 million, and then total number of cattle, so this includes beef, cows as well, is 7.4 million.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think we've about 1.6 million dairy cows, I think, is what we have. So when you put that in a ratio, that's a lot of milk. So yeah, the majority of it is exported. So I suppose to look, when you're dealing with a commodity, you're not dealing with a niche product, and you're trying to make that as low cost as possible. And our big advantage over here is our temperate climate, rainfall, and green grass. So we're trying to produce as much of that milk off of grass as possible, which makes a very high quality commodity, I suppose. So it's very much sought after. Do you remember the melamine disaster that happened in China?
Yep.
Over here at the time, we have these shops called Spar. Have you ever got Spar? You have Spars. So anywhere there was a Spar near a post office, they couldn't keep infant formula here, the Irish infant formula, because what was happening was the Chinese people were buying the infant formula and walking out and going into the post office and posting it home. That's how much faith they had in the Irish product, and how little faith they had in their own, because it's very high in beta carotene out of the grass, and it's very low, I suppose, antibiotics and anthelmintics and other products, nasty products, being used in them to produce the product. So it's very highly sought after. So yeah, look, we're matching our calving pattern then to meet the grass growth curve. So compact calving and fertility in cows and getting them up to target weights is very important. That's the big KPIs we're looking at in this country at the moment. And the weight of the cows versus their output. So we're not looking at liters or gallons, we're looking at kilograms of milk solids, because that's what we ultimately get paid for. Our milk our milk price is based. It's an A plus B minus C system. So it's A is protein, B is butterfat, and the minus C then is volume. So for every liter we send into the processor, we get deducted 0.1 of a cent. If that makes sense.
No.
It's like a volume charge. So the more milk we send in, the more
so
of a
they want
charge we get on it.
concentration, basically. They don't want to be able to pull the water
Oh,
out.
okay.
Okay, correct. Yeah, it's an awful commodity that they have to try deal with when it goes in there. Yeah.
So what would
basically what they do is they take the cream off the top of it, and they sell the rest of it to the yuppies up in Dublin to put into their coffee, and I charge them a premium, but there's not enough for them in this country, I'm afraid, to use all of the skim.
But what's interesting is that the sort of export level is very similar to New Zealand, isn't it, in terms of population
correct.
to export?
Yes.
And also the realization, like within the UK, yes, farming is blamed for greenhouse gases, but the farming is the main source, I'm guessing, of greenhouse gases within Ireland. So you've got whole different pressures, and you've still got EU regs coming in, haven't you? So there's other pressures coming in from a greenhouse gas perspective.
There's massive pressure on the dairy industry in particular, because in terms of the population, our human population, the amount of greenhouse gases that are being produced from agriculture are massive. So we're really being looked on as being the bad boys for our carbon emissions, which we know is cyclical, but and if you drop the output, it's going to have a positive effect on our overall emissions, like even a small bit. But like really, it's only a short-term gain unless you actually do something that's I'm actually referring to culling cows here, I should say, because that's one of our solutions. But ultimately we're going to have to look at fossil fuels at some point or another. So yeah, that's kind of where our industry is. Big pressures on us to reduce our output, but we have and not being cynical about it, we have a world-class advisory service, Chagas, working with us, and I have some absolutely phenomenal research going in at the moment. They're looking at genetic bloodlines in terms of the methane output of cows within breeds. So you have two cows side by side, same output, same size, look identical, but one has a 30% higher methane output than the cow beside her. And this is a genetic trait. So they can map it either with genomic testing or by doing milk recording. They can actually see the markers in the milk recording. So nationally, that means as we are compelled to reduce our output from agriculture by 30%, we could actually do it through genetics, technically. So but it's getting that science through, getting it implemented, and then getting the recognition for it. And why should the farmer do it is the other point. So there's a lot of politics political hurdles to jump over, I suppose.
I suppose your drivers is that volume, isn't it? So you're getting quite a clear market signal in terms of milk solids versus volume.
Yeah.
But the market signals aren't there in terms of sort of as we would nutrient density. I suppose nutrient density is there because of milk solids, but it is a commodity. You're being asked to produce something. Everybody in Ireland is being asked to produce something very similar, aren't they? There is no ability to market it differently or direct sell it, or are there people doing that?
There are people doing it, yeah. A few people, particularly in smaller holdings, but I suppose you're never going to get rich quick from it, because there's if it was a very respectful way of doing it, then we'd all do it, and the value of it would go out of it. It wouldn't be a niche product anymore. But there is a few people doing it. There's vending machines going up. The farmers are doing quite well out of that, but like they're not able to sell enough milk to replace their own say their original sales. So yeah, I suppose that's quite difficult. We're a bit away from a large population really to take up the number of cows that are producing milk. And then look, it's hard to compete with the big products that are there in the market. You will get some people who will pay extra for. I know people are selling like biodynamic milk and organic milk, and those kind of products. But I know like last year in particular, we were actually getting more for our litre of milk than an organic farmer was, which I think is criminal, really. It doesn't make sense, but we were. And on top of that, Ireland imports organic infant formula. After I said all of that, we import organic infant formula from France because we don't have our own processing plant in the country. There hasn't been enough. See, the reason is there hasn't been enough being paid to organic farmers for the milk to justify setting up a dryer to have our own. But I actually believe there's a great story there to be told for Irish farmers with organic infant formula. Like what better infant formula could you give a child than organic infant formula, for people that
So
want to do it.
your dairies, Bruce, who buys your milk?
Yeah, so our dairy, we're Tirlán is our processor. They've recently changed entity, but it's basically it's farmer owned. It's a co-op, and an actual co-op. So I have shares in that as well. So it's yeah, we would have a good representation of farmers on the board then when it comes to the milk pricing. So that look, it kind of it gives the ownership of the company to the farmers. So at least they have that drive in them to sell the product, but also not to put farmers out of business, which we have seen in other industries.
Because some of the processors over here, the milk buyers are kind of they're into all the regenerative stuff. I just wondered if your people over there are similar.
So not really. There is a little bit of talk of regenerative, but not so much in the dairy end of it. I suppose we've got Board B selling our product out in Asia and Africa and China in particular and America. We don't really need to work on ReGen, selling the product as ReGen, because I suppose grass fed is probably the terminology we're selling under, which does ReGen wouldn't have the same clout for sale in the likes of a Chinese supermarket as it would in the UK. So it's not really something that's been pushed as such. But look, at the same time there will be a lot of maybe what's the word? Yeah, look, maybe a lot of the movement of farmers are kind of moving in the same direction in terms of ecology and soil health. Big push from there. Our processors are encouraging us to do different processes, I suppose.
Yeah, so because I guess that leads on to kind of dung beetles, and so you're doing your dung beetle things,
Yeah.
and are you a rare thing?
Well, you called me ordinary last week.
Did I? Oh,
Yeah.
no, I know, but I know. Did I? Sorry.
But well, yeah. Look, I suppose the dung beetles is kind of is an unusual thing, but it's not as if it's new. No, it's not new science. Like it's just it was kind of ignored, I guess. And just look, it created a bit of awareness around it. There is a big movement away from the use of anthelmintics, and there's a huge awareness of the impact that agriculture is having on ecology and the environment. Whereas, you go back 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen farmers planting hedgerows, and they were having the perfectly manicured hedgerows and the perennial ryegrass fields. There's a big change there. Farmers are planting hedgerows. A lot of them are not topping hedges. We're with irrigation agriculture, irrigation farmers and the nitrates. I'll get into that in a second, but that's a certain area of farmers that will be kind of higher stocked. They're compelled to take on certain measures, and one of them is not cutting their hedgerows only on a 3-year cycle. And we are looking at increased riparian zones along water courses. So look, I suppose really in effect, and that coupled then with the cost of nitrogen is getting farmers to look at soil health and nitrogen fixing bacteria like rhizobium in clover. That has gotten farmers to look at that. I suppose we really are taking on a lot of the regenerative practices, just maybe not putting the name on it, I guess. And then there's a few places where ecologists and farmers working together in different projects. I know there's the corncrake, Irish corncrake over in the Mayo and the northwest of Ireland. They've done some fantastic work over there with farmers for a bird that was almost extinct. To have done a lot of work. So yeah, look, it's a changing landscape, to be honest, and trying to do that while pay our bills, I suppose, because our margins are getting tighter as well. I know last year we had a fantastic year, but we knew that was a once in a lifetime year. But yeah, look, we're back to it this year now with tight margins, high inputs, and low prices on the world market. So yeah, look, it's a big challenge, but we're taking it on and we're doing it.
But and I suppose what's interesting is that Ireland, they have the perception of everything's a green and pleasant land, don't they? But as you say, it's only really in the last few years that it's been refocused on the landscape, because it's been a massive increase towards dairy production. And I don't want to keep looking back to the sort of the similarities between Ireland and New Zealand, but you sort of see it, don't you, in terms of massive increase in production and now working out how to slow it down a bit.
Yeah, well, look, I suppose maybe New Zealand have always been maybe a few years ahead of us, which is great, because when it goes tits up in New Zealand, we get a bit of a warning shot. So they've had a unmerciful trouble with animal rights, and look, quite a lot of it is self-inflicted, and we've seen a bit of that happening here, because we weren't worried about selling the product in Ireland, we weren't worried about the Irish consumer, so we were only ever focusing on what the Chinese were thinking about us or what the Americans were thinking about us, and this is where all our focus was, but we never looked after our neighbours. Well, I won't say that, we maybe took our eye off the ball a bit, and we didn't, we have environmental board there called Antoshka. It's an Irish word, don't ask me what it means. They objected to planning permission there a couple of years ago. Our own processor was building a new soft cheese processing plant down in Waterford and the southeast of Ireland, and they basically they cause a lot of trouble with planning permission anyway, because it has to go through them to approve it, and they have kept objecting to it. They end up having to go to the High Court to get it through, but it delayed it while there was an increase of milk coming in Ireland, and we didn't have somewhere to process the milk, so there was restrictions put on every farmer for a couple of years in terms of how much milk they can produce, which is, we didn't get much of a warning for it. It's kind of, this is happening for you in 9 months' time sort of thing. So, someone like myself that was expanding at a quite large, fast rate and had young animals coming through the system, it put a big change in our plans at the time. So look, I suppose the point is, we probably didn't look after their concerns early enough, and there were legitimate concerns. I know, as a farmer at the time, I was cursing them, but they had legitimate concerns, I believed, and they weren't being taken seriously enough. But I do believe that the farmers now are like, basically they were looking at, there was too many cows in the southeast of Ireland, and that the water quality in Ireland was deteriorating, which, trying to be non-cynical about it, I would say has actually improved since then. But there's different ways of interpreting the results from the Environmental Protection Agency, and it gets quite intricate when you start discussing it with someone, as to whether the water quality has increased or decreased in Ireland. But there's certainly been a mammoth focus put on dairy farms in terms of water quality. Like I said, about the riparian zones, the pH of the soil, slurry storage, low emission slurry spreading, and then using common sense stuff like not spreading, even if you are technically allowed to, when there's maybe rain forecast in the next few days. And then, of course, with the increase in the cost of nutrients, the value of these products don't want to be washed away effectively. So no farmer wants to see them going down the waterways. And it's actually amazing, even see it on social media. You go back 5 or 6 years ago, and we're all putting up our co-op reports and comparing our protein percentages and butter fats and conception rates. You look at it now, and it's whose pond is the biggest, what fish have they got in it, who has buzzards, how many have they got. So it has changed. So it's great to be able to see that with the technical efficiencies that have also come on board as well. So look, I suppose point is, we're making efficient agriculture work with ecology as best we can. Look, we have a lot more work to do. There's no point in saying otherwise. But we're heading, our heads face the right way anyway.
So just going back to dung beetles, when did you first start thinking?
Right. Well, I suppose my first time was, I was out on a safari in South Africa with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we saw one of those big rollers rolling an elephant dung and putting it into the soil, and I thought, God, wouldn't it be fantastic if we had one of those, or a few of those in our fields, and put the cow dung into the soil. Didn't really think much about it, and remember being at home, sitting beside a crush with my animal crush with my pen with my dad after having an argument over worming calves. Discussion over worming calves, and we knew that we were heading the wrong way because we were using a lot of product at the time, and Dad was reminiscing, of course, as he does, about the old days and what they did, and they didn't seem to be using anywhere near the same amount of product. So we decided then at that stage, to look at a bit more diagnostics. And I had a chance conversation a year or two later with an entomologist, Sally Ann Spence. She's from Cambridge. Is Cambridge, yeah. And was talking about she was talking about the effect that anthelmintics had. That's the wormers that we use, what effects they had on the dung beetles. And I was saying, well, we've actually reduced our usage in anthelmintics, and we've found that we've it seems to be on an upward spiral now, that we're using less and less. And she was sure that she assured me that because I was using less, there was more dung beetles there, and because of that, we didn't have to use as many because they were affecting the life cycle of the parasites that we're trying to worm against. So I found this fascinating, didn't realize with dung beetles, and went out into a field, got down on my hands and knees and started having a look through cow pats, normal neighbors or normal stuff that you do. And lo and behold, there was dung beetles working away. And they were there all along under third. Sorry about that. But anyway, yeah, my neighbours kind of looked at me a bit strange, and as they were passing by, threw me a few euro for being in hard luck. And I got fascinated by this. And look, I had a grow to be to do an Nuffield scholarship as well, and I brought the topic to them to see about looking at the effect that antibiotics.
But there's one thing kind of having a little bit of an interest, but then there's another thing like going into it as much as you have done and doing your Nuffield. And are you an obsessive person?
Yeah. I have to see something through. Yeah. Oh, I hate unfinished stuff. Yeah, it wrecks me head. Yeah. So yeah, when I start on something, it either works or it doesn't work. There's no wonder did it work or not. We can conclusively say whether something worked or not. And I don't mind admitting defeat either. But yeah, I have to see something through. Yeah.
But and in terms of, suppose, if you go into your neighbour's farm, would the dung beetles be there as well? Is it that you've just got a lot of them, or you are I suppose are you generating them that then are going wider, or do you just?
Yeah, the last point you said is actually correct. Because they don't stay inside my ditches. They can fly quite a long distance. Some species in particular. I know where I visited in Tasmania, I met one of the entomologists there, and they had marked beetles when they were releasing them because they were introducing them into Tasmania. They found them 40 kilometers away. So, really, there's a lot dependent on what's going on around your farm as well. Because if you're an organic farmer in the middle in a sea of ivermectin, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to have beetles on your farm, unfortunately. Whereas around us, we're lucky. There's quite a few small farmers, small holdings, and part-time farmers. Lowly stocked. The animals won't be under pressure, so they're not using a lot of wormers locally. So I'm quite lucky in that regard. Then, so, and look, you need to have animals around you then as well. If you're in the middle of an arable area, you're not going to have. Well, you will get the beetles up, the numbers up, but it's going to take a lot more work to do that.
And I suppose you mentioned the fact is you got rid of your sheep. I'm guessing there's a lot more dosing going on a lot of sheep farms than there is.
Yeah, well, sheep are more susceptible to parasites. And look, they're a younger animal. Really, you have a lot more younger animals which don't really get to build up resilience. So, really, when you look at a dairy cow that's 6 or 7 years of age, she shouldn't really need to be wormed, and that's a kind of the aim. Whereas sheep, you're going to have a lot of lambs on the farm, and they've never been exposed to parasites before, so they're obviously going to need to be wormed. So you're going to have a high percentage of your stock are very young when you've sheep. They're grazing a lot lower, and just their whole digestive system is more susceptible to parasites. So yeah, but that said, if you're working a mixed system, there's parasites that sheep wouldn't be susceptible to that cows are. So if you're working a rotation there, you can actually help. One species can help the other. I suppose yeah, lungworm would be one for a good example. It doesn't really affect sheep, but it's a big trouble, particularly this year for young calves.
And you mentioned during in terms of focusing on genomics. So I'm more aware of within the sheep is that we are starting to look at estimated breeding values for resilience, drought resistance. But what's happening within the dairy industry on that parasite resilience as a genetic marker?
Yeah, I suppose the only one really that we have nationally tied into our EBI system, which is our Economic Breeding Index, is liver fluke. But we can actually select bulls that are resistant to liver fluke now. We can look them up to see what their value is, along with tuberculosis. But look, I suppose this data that you're collecting has to be proven, and it's only as good as the information that it's fed into it. So like with liver fluke, they're getting the data from the kill sheets from the factories, so they're able to see the damage done by liver fluke in the factories. But it's much more difficult then when it comes to general worms like Ostratagia, which is your stomach worm. Unless farmers are putting in the data in terms of selective use of anthelmintics, which is a very very niche area. You're not going to get that kind of proven. So it's going to take a lot more science to identify those genes. So a bit of work to do there. But I suppose what I've noticed is, generally speaking, when you're looking at animals that are resilient to one ailment, they can be fairly resilient to other ones. What I've noticed anyway, if you have animals with bad feet, that have mastitis, that have lungworm when they're younger, they've all sorts of blooming ailments. So they're really, if you don't record that information, you give your animal an antibiotic this spring. In the autumn, then you have her on an anti-inflammatory for a sore foot. She got a wormer over the winter. If you don't record that information, you don't really see it happening, and you're breeding then from those animals, and they're hiding in the herds. Whereas if you get better at recording that stuff, I suppose a good example is a friend of mine. He was a sheep farmer, and he'd a good bit of lameness in his flock, and every time the sheep, he was bringing them in to foot bath them, the last 5 or 6 ewes, he'd come along with an ear puncher and put a punch in their ear. At the end of the year, he just took out all the ones with the punches in their ears, and within 2 years, he solved his lameness issue. No more lameness. But yeah, look, it just shows the possibility with breeding and recording the problems that we're seeing.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to beetles again. So when they, can you just talk a little bit about cow poos?
Yep.
Consistency and what the beetles do in that poo. Yeah,
okay. So I suppose we've spent 3 generations now dealing with parasites in the animal's stomach. But 80% of the parasites, 80 to 85% of the parasites at any given time are out in pasture, and we haven't been managing them out there. So your dung pat is what I focused on mainly. I looked at grazing strategies as well, but the dung pat is basically an incubator for parasites. So it's also a habitat for loads of insects. But the dung beetles was probably the most dramatic one of all in terms of what they do. They go into the dung pat and they don't eat it, they drink it. And they're drinking the bacteria out of it because it's mainly liquid. If you look at a dung pat, any dung pat is, I think it's about 3/4 of it is liquid. I won't say water. And they dry it out, and in doing so, the aquatic parasites are not able to hatch and migrate out onto grassland. I suppose really what we're trying to prevent is a wave of parasites coming out. You'll never stop them. We're not going to get rid of parasites. That's just not going to happen. But what you want to stop is a big wall of parasites when the animals come round on their next rotation that is just covered in larvae. The grassland's covered in larvae. So what the dung beetles are doing is preventing them from hatching and migrating out onto grass in large numbers. The majority of them, that's the way the majority of beetles in UK and Ireland work, is they drink the pats dry, they lay their eggs in underneath the dung pat, And when they dry out, to a certain extent, the earthworms then come in and they pull it into the soil, consume it, and turn it into topsoil, basically. So it's goodbye to the parasites then at that stage. You have earth-burrowing beetles as well. They lay their eggs deep in the soil, so they can go right down to a meter in depth and lay their eggs in the soil, pulling it into the ground. They were the ones they introduced into Australia and New Zealand because they were trying to get rid of the dung pats off of pasture altogether. But look, we don't have to do that when they're there naturally. So yeah, they would probably have a larger effect, but they're smaller in numbers. And I think they're more affected by the timing of wormers and fly control products. That's my opinion on it. That they're more affected by them because they're later in the season, which is when the worming, second half of the season, the worming concentration on the products is on the pasture is a higher level. So that's the effect that they have. And then look, they're a food source for birds, bats,
Owls.
owls, yes, badgers and foxes. And they keep nutrients in the soil rather than running off the soil and into waterways. There's another advantage of them. And they also carry little phoretic mites on them. They're like little flies. They act as a taxi. And those little mites are known for eating fly larvae. So they reduce the fly loading on pasture as well in doing so.
I think the fact that they drink the poo is incredible. Did you know that, Bruce, before you went down this route?
No, I didn't. Yeah, that's basically what they do.
They're filtering, aren't they? So it's basically like a whale.
Yeah,
consuming a lot to get the plankton or whatever out. So it's
bacteria really. Yeah, that they're feeding on. Yeah, the sugars and bacteria in the cow poo.
So what do you do about flies? You're milking a lot of cows?
Yeah.
What do you do about fly control in the summer, like with heifers and stuff?
So with the heifers, what we use is we use Stockholm tar and paint it on their teats, and we put eucalyptus oil on their backs, and find that very effective. It's a bit of a pain in the bum to use, but we find it very effective.
And how often do you do that?
Depends on the weather. So rainy weather, it won't last that long. A week tops in rainy weather. But in rainy weather, you don't have a lot of flies. Like what we've been having this month so far. But yeah, warm weather, then it'll last 3 or 4 weeks, up to 3 or 4 weeks.
I'm thinking the majority of farmers probably still use the likes of Spot On and Squish and all those. So would you ever go down that route, or are you kind of is that like a line in the sand, or would you do that?
Okay, so I have a big confession to make. This year we're very tight on people here. 1 week we had a lot of flies, and we had a lot of animals here to get through at the time, because we were caught with TB and we went in with Spot On. That's the first time I'd say I had to go and get a new bottle of it, because the bottle I had on the shelf was out of date by about 5 years. So it's the first time in a long time that I've used it. And that was back in, was it June, I think? And last week we had a heifer with mastitis. First time in years we've had it. But I would say, look, unless you really have to use the stuff, but if you have to use it, you have to use it. But unless you really have to use the stuff, I'd be staying away from it. Like there is some farmers putting it on in March and April, because start off the year, the animals are gone out, they don't want fly problems before they even look at flies, and then they're looking at the wrong flies.
I don't think they know that it's what it does, because I was clueless, because it just kills everything.
To be perfectly honest, I actually think it's, and this is my opinion, I think it's probably one of the worst products we're using on the farms in terms of its damage to insects. And that's Bruce's opinion, because I think the volume of stuff we're using and its persistency and where it's placed and where it ends up, and we're seeing the effects that some of these products are having in waterways in terms of products being used on dogs. So I look, I know it's a different type of product, but it's still the same concept. I don't think it's a good product to be using prophylactically. I'd be saying, like, not telling everyone to go out and start painting eucalyptus oil on teats, because it's only a certain kind of people that'll do that. But wait till you see flies and then put it on. Like, why would you put on a product when you have before you flies there?
But if you but I was talking to someone about flies this week, and they were preempting it. They were like, it only works if I start spraying it on 6 weeks before I start to see flies. So doing it, and so you're then potentially doing fly treatments from sometime in April all the way through the season.
Yeah.
And I think that, I've got into various problems talking about this in the past, but I think the challenge is that transition, isn't it? And I tend to do a lot more chat with sheep. So blight fly strike on sheep is hideous. And what we don't want is people to just stop using products, and therefore
cold turkey.
we have a welfare concern, don't we? From various, we can mitigate some of it by shearing and timing and all that stuff. But a bit I'm interested in is how you transition from, we've probably got a few dung beetles, they're probably not very healthy because we keep applying stuff on them, through to what is the dream and how long could that be?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose I'm talking about young stock, like the dairy cows. Like I know plenty of farmers that are using that stuff on dairy cows all year. There's really no need to use. We never use it on a dairy cow on our farm, and our cell count is very low. We've very low cases of mastitis. But like, there's products you can put into teat spray. Cows are coming into the parlour twice a day, and there's companies that are selling teat spray. Will add these products to it as well, like peppermint, eucalyptus oil, neem oil. Like, they're all licensed products that can be used in teat spray as well. Like, if you don't have to use it there, like, you're talking of a huge volume of stuff in dairy cows. Like, that's one place. But I don't buy into the idea that you have to start going in 6 weeks early with it. Like, what happens when that product won't work on flies? I want to ask someone that, like, what's their plan for it when they get resistance in the flies to the product? Like, it's it's looking at a fairly grim future when the products won't work for us. And the companies are not making new products. You've two basic products there for fly control that are licensed. You've cypermethrin and deltametrin, and you can put whatever name you want on the packet. That's basically what they are, and the flies won't differentiate between the name and the packet. So if you get resistance in the fly population, which we are getting, every time you use that product is a time less it's going to work in the future. So, farmer that's every year going in, starting in April, May, June, July, going in every six weeks with it, going in 7 or 8 times. Like, a farmer down the road then that's using it maybe once a year, he's going to last 7 times longer with that product.
I suppose for the people you've spoken to who are interested in reducing their usage, so what are the steps that you sort of encourage them to think about first? So it is about using.
Yeah, with the fly control products, the first question I ask is why are you using it? Because it usually starts a good conversation. And really, I'd like to see someone pointing out flies to me, if they're using the product, to control them. So, like, if they're not pointing out flies, then they shouldn't be using the product. So I would say, and then look with the cows, what we're saying, we're adding the product into it. Like, that's a very simple thing into the teat spray, adding the product into it, like your peppermint or eucalyptus oil, which they're non-toxic. Whereas I suppose it's a very simple thing to do with fly control products. Probably a little bit more complex with anthelmintics, but there's a lot more you can do with using wormers, your anthelmintics, in terms of reducing the usage of them. So first step is use diagnostics rather than historic usage dates. Last year I had one group of farmers, I have a different group this year using diagnostics to decide when to go and worm their calves, and it's amazing. They're all very surprised, I suppose, with how little worming they actually need to do on their animals when they actually start using diagnostics, and how what part of the year they actually start using them. There's no worming needed. From what I've seen the last 2 years, there was no worming needed until mid to late summer. So this worming that used to be done in May and June was a complete waste of time. And now I'm not saying, look, next year could be a different year, but when you have science behind you, you have someone with a microscope telling you they don't have worms, then you're only wasting money and time, and then of course you're damaging your dung beetles, which are your natural predator to your parasites. So look, you stay doing that year after year, you're going to have a sterile environment for the parasites to come into. So yeah, that's the diagnostics. Then look, I suppose interpretation of results then is another tricky area. Some vets are really good. Some of them will just tell you to use a wormer because it just gets you out of their hair. Vets are, to be fair, busy, and they can't be dealing with being told, telling a farmer not to worm his animals, and then they don't see the farmer for 8 weeks, and he comes in complaining that he's got lungworm, and it's the vet's fault because he told him not to worm 8 weeks ago, because that does happen. They need to be constantly engaged with their vet as to what's going on the ground. Stockmanship then as well. I keep referring to lungworm. I suppose coccidia would be a good one. Good example. How do we know a calf has coccidia? Well, they all have coccidia, but it's not till it's well, they don't all, but a lot of them have coccidia, but it's not pathogenic until they become stressed. And what are the signs of that? You're a calf standing up and stretching and walking about 5 or 6 steps and lying back down again, and they have a sore anus, sort of pushing and kicking at themselves a little bit, and it's not very obvious, but a good, these good trained eyes with stockmanship are able to spot this, and they know which calves then to dose for coccidia, rather than incorrectly diagnosing loose dung paths as being worms and going in with a wormer then, and then going back in again a few weeks later because it didn't work. And that's quite common. So yeah, look, they're all the things that can be done. It gets very complex, but I would definitely say to any farmer to go and speak to their vet and tell them you want to take a diagnostic route on using anthelmintics and wormers. How do they start doing it? What can they do? And keep in contact with your vet. And you need to push the vet to do it as well. The vets will do it, but you need to work with them.
But the bit that interests me is that, this is a wide generalization about vets, is that they're very focused on the diagnostics, aren't they? So they'll put tests in, but will they cover the genetics? Will they cover the selection intensity that might be needed? And will they also cover the fact is that it's the ecology of the system, isn't it? So you're trying to tackle it in lots of different ways.
Yeah, that's the farmer's job, isn't it, to tie all that together, really. Unfortunately. Yeah, you have to be an expert in your field, but yeah, you just have to employ all those areas of expertise and take them on. Grazing management, look, that's where vets wouldn't be very well clued in, or anyone other than farmers. If you put calves out onto the same pasture and leave them on it for long periods of time and back onto it next year, that's going to completely overwhelm the calves with parasites. So it's not really a great practice, but farmers could get into a system of rotational grazing and mixing species, or mixing ages of stock in terms of the rotations. So there's lots can be done. And it's very hard to explain it in a few minutes over a webinar.
But the thing is, Bruce, at Carbon Calling, Claire Whittle, who's a vet and part of your Dung Beetles farmers gang, people will be able to go out in the field with you at Tim's at lunchtime, won't they? And go and, as Claire says, fiddle with poo, fiddle with beetles, do what you will.
Pick up a few packs.
So so the combination of you, the farmer, dung beetle guru, and Claire being a vet and also a dung beetle huge fan, I think it'll be quite powerful combination.
And the bit that I keep coming back in my head to remember from the Greg Judy bit last year, which was when he was because he was looking for certain cow coat types, or was culling out for sort of cows that were more susceptible to flies landing on them, so wanted a slick coat. But he was also putting up more tree swallow nests, wasn't he? So he was also encouraging birds to do work on the flies as well. Isn't necessarily solving the parasite issue, but it's the fly stuff he was quite interested in, is about this multifactorial way of dealing with it, rather than just one thing and just spraying. You
go for the bottle. But the swifts are really good at getting flies. You would see here after you start noticing things then as well, and that's why I'm very into when you talk about baselines. Like I've definitely seen an increase of dung beetles on the farm here. Now I have been breeding them as well, but I suppose what I don't know is, if you weren't looking at something to start with, then that's you have a very low baseline to start with. So it's hard to tell to what degree. But when you start noticing these things, and I suppose coal tits is one thing I really notice on the farm here. 3 days after cows have grazed the paddock, you'd see the coal tits swooping across, and we know what they're after now. Like, we used to just throw a blind eye to it, but we know they're catching the dung beetles trying to fly into the pasture. So
we've got Tim's asked a question. So do you go out to other farmers and advise? Are you is consultancy part of your job now?
I've done a bit of it, hasn't been, not really my job description, but I have done. I do anything for a few quid. No, I have done a bit of it, but it is, I suppose it's a very, you're looking at a very a new and a novel area now. You're looking at grazing management, you're looking at veterinary products, you're looking at diagnostics, you're looking at animal type. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not really been all tied up by any one entity in particular. So I suppose it's gathering all that information and putting it into something that's workable on a farm. And it has to be flexible as well. So look, I have gone down that route and done a bit of it. Maybe it's something I'll chase doing, to be honest. But I've just been quite busy there the last few years. Well, between Nuffield and I took on doing a diploma as well. But I'm just finishing that now. So maybe it's something I might look at a bit deeper, if I thought there was a demand for it.
And there's a question. There's a question for David. Do you think your cows have become more resilient to flies since you've gone down this route, or do you just notice them less, or there's just fewer flies around? Or
I would say fewer flies around, to be honest. I don't know if they build up resilience to flies. I actually don't know if they would. Definitely to internal parasites, but the external ones, well, you will with lice anyway. But with biting flies, I don't think they build up much resilience to them. But there's definitely less of them around because we have more dung beetles on the farm, so they will take care of a lot of them.
I know this is a bit anthropomorphic, but there are people that get more bitten than other people, aren't there? So there's a potential there might be some individual variation in the attractiveness to a particular fly that we're probably not selecting for because we're just trying to annihilate the fly population.
Yeah, well, anytime myself and my wife go anywhere on holidays, she comes home with bites on her, and I come home.
We don't know. We don't need to know what you do on holiday.
The mosquitoes have never touched me at all, but they just so it's like parking your car beside my little Ford Fiesta pulls up beside a Ferrari. My car's never going to get nicked, like. So.
I'm not sure how we're going to get out of this cul-de-sac of conversation, but we'll try. Yeah. So I know a few people who are basically culling out any sheep. This again back to sheep briefly, but any sheep that are being struck compared, like if there's a group and one's been struck for no particular reason, then it is now being culled out. So we're indirectly selecting for some sort of preference for those flies.
Yeah, well, look, it definitely will eventually help. It's very hard to pull out animals out of a herd or a flock based on one ailment, but definitely, if you're looking at selecting animals, I would certainly be selecting them, looking at that in terms of like I suppose for us with dairy animals, if I have a calf that has been wormed maybe three or four times in her first season, I won't be putting her in calf to a dairy breed. She'll be going in calf to a beef breed, so her genetics will never follow through in the herd. Whereas there's some animals in my farm, mature cows have never seen a wormer. They're the type of cows I want, and it's notoriously difficult to record all that information, but we have a computer in our hand the whole time, with farm software on it. It's very easy to do. It's just a matter of being strict with doing it. You have to be really, really rigid with writing in information, picking out animals, and but yeah, look, you would see. I know that we have 2 stock bulls running to clean up heifers there at the moment, and there's one of them. Every time he comes into the yard with the heifers, there's flies flying around him. Now he's a beef breed, so it doesn't really worry me too much. But if that was a dairy breed, I'd probably be a little bit more concerned about what that could be leaving in my herd. But it's just amazing. One of them is covered in flies, the other one's not, and they look completely the same.
And a couple of things just to ask questions on. One is about, you mentioned casually that you breed your own dung beetles. So how do you do that?
Oh, it's basically in a dung pat, right? If there's 2 dung beetles in it, male and female, they'll eventually find each other and hold hands and take each other out for dinner. Yeah. You drink this bit. This bit's quite nice. And they'll lay a few eggs, and then they'll move off to the next dung pat. But if you put a lot of them into it, it turns into Glastonbury. So there's a big fight on. They're fighting over each other. They get down to business a lot quicker. They're off to the chippers on the way home, and they lay a lot more eggs. And move off to the next dung pat. So that when you've more competition, they breed at a higher rate. Basically, that's what I'm getting at. So, basically, when you're breeding them, the crude way of explaining it is you try and mimic a shortage of food for them, so you put a lot of them into a small area and get them to mate a lot quicker. And
this is like some bizarre dating game, Bruce.
Yeah, it is. Well, you can imagine if you had, if you blind date where you had 1 man and 3 women there and they were interviewing, it was dead boring, wasn't it? Whereas Love Island is, there's a lot more involved in it. So
maybe this is what we should do at Carbon Calling.
No,
Oh,
I'm not sure we have the insurance for it.
It wouldn't be worth the paperwork, Nick. Yeah.
Informally, people can do whatever they want as long as they don't complain.
Yeah.
Or
So that's basically what you do, but like I suppose you have to catch the stock, you have to speciate them, you have to you have to make sure you have the right dung. There's temperatures, there's times of the year, there's releasing them. I've done some of it in field tents, and we're getting a 19-to-1 increase in populations when we do it that way. I tried the big earth burrowing ones. I have a lot more work to do on that, and it needs a lot of time and effort. I've been doing those inside in incubators, I was trying to make it August in an incubator all year round to get these breeds to.
so Claire came up to us and we found one of those big ones. What are they called?
Geotrupidae, yeah.
Yeah, and it was incredible because I'd seen them before, but we actually kind of found it. How old is that? It looked like a fully grown up one. How long does it take them to grow up?
So they're generally fairly well formed when they go through their instars. So basically, when they hatch, they're nearly fully formed. Now to be a little bit smaller, but you're not going to see. It's not like a calf growing up into a cow. Like they're they're a bit small, put on a bit of weight, and that's it. They're an adult. But what happens is they're laid in an egg, and they go through a few metamorphoses in the egg, through different instars, and that can go through a period of diapause over, say, winter time, and they're just sitting there as a larvae or a half-formed larvae until they get certain weather conditions, the sun shining down, and then they get heavy rain, and then it triggers them to continue their metamorphosis into a fully grown beetle. So generally arriving then out of the dung pat as a fairly, I won't say a big adult, but they wouldn't be far off of it. They're quite impressive, those big ones.
Oh, amazing. And I think that's so my brother, who's like hardcore dairy farmer, no real interest in anything vaguely ecological. He messaged me the other day to say he'd found one, and it kind of properly floated his boat. So
okay, cool. Yeah.
It's just little things, isn't it, that get people.
Tell him to take a picture of it and put it on his bottle of Spot On the next time. So
I know. Well, I did say. but so how can I ask one last question, Liz?
Yeah.
How much enjoyment has this given you, and where do you see it going, and where do you see your farm going? I've really enjoyed doing this, and like what's been the real buzz is the appetite for change that is in agriculture, and the appetite for knowledge. And like, I didn't create anything or find out anything. I just found it somewhere else, to be honest, and just collated it. And it's been it's been brilliant being able to work with ecologists who were perceived as being anti-farmers, but they're actually not. I think farmers are more anti-ecologists than ecologists are anti-farmers, to be honest. That's a criticism of farmers. So I think we need to be a little bit more open to them. Now, look, you get the odd nut job, all right, but they're easy to figure out.
Get them in farmers.
Yeah, do actually, to be fair. quite a large percentage too. But
you said that, not me. Just
saying. Yeah. And look, it's kind of turned into myself at the weekend there. Myself and my wife went out to a restaurant for an argument, and we just got into a conversation because we've been together for quite a while, and how we've changed over the years. And it's just, she said, since we had kids and started Nuffield, the drive that has created in our household has been brilliant. yeah, just you just get more hungry. What am I doing next? Where am I going? And just not enough time in the day. Yeah, look, it's been brilliant, to be honest.
Well, as someone said in the chat, has said, yeah, your blend of farmer sense, humour, and science. And there is a question there. Does Bruce use any natural anthelmintics, including in his grazing system?
So that's, I presume, referring to either Dudintonian flagrans or condensed tannins in chicory, for example. But I don't really buy into them too much. I think that's more of, because we're grazing some herbal lays here as well. I think the contribution that they make as an anthelmintic is overstated. I actually believe the reason that you don't have big worm loadings on them is probably threefold. One, that the herbal lays are more fibrous, so you end up with a drier pat that the parasites don't seem to profilate in as well. You're on longer rotations, so you're kind of sidestepping that wave of parasites that are going to come out at 3 weeks. And also there's a mechanical thing with them as well. So your chicory is not as nice a plant to climb for parasites as perennial ryegrasses are. And then you're not grazing them down as tight, which, because I think it's about 80 to 90% of the parasites are down in the bottom 5 centimeters of a sward. You're never grazing herbal lay down that tight anyway. So yeah, look, the condensed tannins do have an effect, but I certainly wouldn't be chasing it. I think there's more areas to be gained from the herbal lays, if that's what we're looking at. Dudintonian flagrans are another one that I think it's a fungus that you can use, but my argument with a fungus is that ivermectin is actually derived from a fungus as well. It was found on a golf course in Japan by an Irishman. And he got a Nobel Prize for it. So I wouldn't be looking at fungi as being a solution either, because eventually the parasites become resistant to it as well. So yeah.
With the element of wanting people to leaving
people wanting more.
Exactly. And I've just had a panic that I haven't shut my chickens up. So we might have to just call it, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Nick, key point from you from this evening.
I just love an Irish accent. No, seriously. I think what Bruce said when you were talking with your wife in the restaurant, I think that's good, because as you get older, you have this kind of you haven't got as long left as you had before, and you don't want to waste a minute. And I think it's wanting to learn everything every day, and I think that's good. And I'm looking forward to what subject he picks on to add to his dung beetles, and then we can all learn off Bruce.
Have his own YouTube channel.
Yeah, good day, Bruce.
I finally finished this book, which you might not. It's called Rebugging the Planet, and over the weekend, and that was interesting. Dung beetles, both dung beetles and worms feature, so it was like dream book. So yeah. Anyway, but thank you. So we'll see. Vicky Hurd.
Vicky Hurd.
It's a good balance between like quite a lot of science behind the bugs, but also how they have to fit within a better food system. So we can't, if we just try to improve the bug life without thinking about what we're eating and how we're choosing to get it produced. It was interesting.
Very good.
But Bruce is going to be at the bar on Friday night at Carbon Calling, aren't you, Bruce? Hopefully.
Yeah. When I was singing an Irish song. Oh, Danny Bobby.
Don't get us started. Don't start her off.
Oh, well, there'll be a guitar there. Renault will be there with him.
I'm not singing. That's the last you heard of it now.
Bruce is speaking with Stuart Johnson on Saturday afternoon. He's doing the lunchtime thing with Claire. And yeah, well, thank you all for joining us. And Bruce, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry
I'll
about the
see you
stressful
soon.
No problem.
start. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.